Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Mission Admissions cuts through the noise in college admissions and recruitment. Host Jeremy Tiers brings a fresh perspective, packing each episode with straight talk advice, tips, and strategies from a mix of pros inside and outside higher ed. One of the things I love most about the show is how Jeremy often brings voices from outside the industry to share perspectives and practices that can be applied to the work that marketers and enrollment professionals like you do every day. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Mission Admissions wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, a podcast that addresses the do's, don'ts, and dynamics of the digital ecosystem specific to higher education. I'm your host, Li Fowler. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education social media management and marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hello, friends. I'm really excited to introduce you to Nick Moran, the Director of Audience Development at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And if you're not already following them on Instagram, which is Johns Hopkins SPH, I highly recommend you do. Nick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So how did you get into higher ed social media?
I took a bit of a winding path. So I finished college like the December of 2009. So I graduated a semester early. And at the time, that was kind of bearing the brunt of the recession with job availability. And at the time, I was also graduating as an English major. And so my first step was to go to New York City and work in the publishing industry because it was the most natural fit. But while I was doing that, I realized quite quickly I was in a really expensive place to live and I was making not a lot of money.
For sure.
So I needed some side gigs. And one of those became running social media for a literary site, a book review blog that was pretty popular at the time called The Millions. And so I did that just on a casual part-time basis when I wasn't doing my actual job. And then along the way, as my career progressed, I eventually got out of publishing to work in finance for 1 year, but I kept the side hustle Millions job as social media manager, just kind of to keep one foot in the publishing industry in case I ever wanted to return. Turned out that day never came. But by this point, I'm 3 years out of school with 3 years of professional social media experience at a time that not a lot of people had that many years of social media experience. And so I parlayed all of that into applying to be the first ever social media specialist at the School of Public Health here in Johns Hopkins. My now wife, partner at the time, was from Baltimore originally. We were living in New Jersey, but we didn't want to stay there particularly. So we came back to Baltimore. She got a job first. I followed later by just applying really, I was an open book. I would work anywhere. And this job just seemed like something I could do. And ever since I've been at the school, so that's 10 years now I've been at the school.
That's amazing. I think like many of us, we just kind of fell into it, so to speak. But that's great. So you were the first ever and you've been there. Sounds like you've been shepherding their online presence ever since.
Yeah. So it's probably pretty common for a lot of people you talk to. I was originally kind of carved out of the PR director's role, but over the last couple of years, it's shifted and now we're no longer nested underneath PR. We're our own digital marketing operation.
That's great, as you should be. So how did you decide to take on the approach of injecting humor into your content?
The story really starts during the COVID years, which I'm sure everyone revisited their content strategy. But the shortest way I can tell it is when we went remote, so call that March, April 2020, you immediately lose the bread and butter of all of your campus social media programming. You can't do photos of events. There aren't even events. This was like before Zoom. You can't use old photos because you want to reinforce masking and distance and all that. And so we started pretty quickly with just a full-on animations approach of illustrations, graphics, etc. And they started pretty tame. But the longer you work in that environment, or the longer I work in that environment, certainly, the more you kind of want to go from illustration into cartooning. And that sort of naturally, it was like a dimmer switch. It wasn't like an all at once we were like really funny. But you start with like a little embellishment in the drawing, or you start with like a little Easter egg, like make the guy's t-shirt say something funny. And after a while, you kind of fall into seeing that it's working. And then you kind of feed the monster some more and keep going with that. And I will say we've learned some lessons about what not to joke about, but I'm glad we learned them. And now we kind of have that MO, but instead of for infectious disease content, we just use it for all of the topics that we would want to talk about.
I like that description of the dimmer switch, because it's not like you just flipped. It was a gradual like transition, I guess, into humor. So did you get any pushback from leadership on this strategy?
I think the honest truth is that we were doing it for the most part on Instagram, where a very few of our leadership actually was spending their time.
Fair.
If we had started this on Facebook or Twitter, we would have seen some more immediate comments. But by the time they kind of caught wind of it, or at least the ones who maybe would be most skeptical of the strategy, by the time they caught wind of it, we had proof of concept that it was working so well. And I will say, to this day, we still have a different sensibility depending on what platform we're on. Certainly Instagram is where we can get away with, I think, the most out there stuff. Twitter and LinkedIn is probably where we're most risk averse. Facebook gets like kind of, we'll pick and choose. Sometimes the things on Instagram work there and we have a good hunch about that. Sometimes they fall right on their face when we do that. So
I love that. Ask for forgiveness later sort of strategy, which I tend to prefer. But you did talk about there are some topics that you've learned not to sort of try to be funny about, while there are others that your audience is more accepting of. And how did you balance that? Because you do have to tackle some very serious topics as the School of Public Health. So how did you discover that and balance that?
Yeah, so I would say that there have always been some topics that we just knew don't even attempt to be funny. It wasn't like we tried, it went badly, and we just never tried it. So like the obvious one is like gun violence prevention. Like we wouldn't try to make a joke of that. The other ones, though, we've learned it might be that the subject is either really boring and it's hard to be funny about it, or it might be that the subject is really complicated and it's hard to distill down to a joke. There's the famous quote, like, brevity is the soul of wit. Like, the more you have to lead up to a joke, the less anyone's going to laugh at it. And so what we've done is we've identified, like, maybe it is a really boring topic. Maybe it is something like, hey, we're just reminding people to get the flu shot. And there may not be anything funny about that, but there might be a joke in there about us making fun of ourselves for being the annoying person reminding this person who's scrolling through their feed, and like we're bothering you with this reminder. Like that can be a joke. And the lesson there is it wasn't trial and error. We've known not to punch down, so to speak. So don't make fun of someone who's not getting the flu shot. That's not the audience that you're going to convince by doing this.
Okay.
But you can make fun of yourself for being annoying by reminding people to get the flu shot. Similarly, we wouldn't make fun of like a group who has like a condition or something. That's never something we would do. But we might make fun of like the precautions that people think they might have to take about this, which turns out not to actually be true. And in that way, it's kind of like what we're going for all the time is like entertainment, but also teaching you something. Mm-hmm. So And actually, to use a COVID example, when people were still like spraying their groceries with things, like we knew that that's not going to help, but we can all laugh. Like, I can't believe we did that last year.
Yes. Yeah. I have that. Yeah. So how do you continue to stay creative and fresh?
So the short answer is it isn't just me. There are times where I'm not creative. And speaking for my own process, what I can say is that a lot of the time, to spur creativity, what you need to do is just actually stop trying to be creative and just walk away and do something else, mow the lawn, take a shower, and maybe the idea will come to you then when you're not really thinking of anything else, as opposed to like sitting here looking at a blank Word document for like an hour. Like I've never had a success.
Be
doing
funny.
that.
Be funny now. It doesn't work. Yeah.
And so that's my own process. I would also say, like, when it comes to community engagement, one thing that I've coached my team on is once in a while, you may have an opportunity to get kind of like Wendy's Twitter account level sassy in community engagement, like snap back at somebody in the moment. If a reply that's funny and like that comes to you, that's probably okay. It's probably like you had an immediate reaction. You thought of it. It's probably like, as long as it's PG-13 and all that, like it's probably fine. Where I've seen people get in trouble is where they sit down for like an hour trying to think of like, what can I clap back to this person with? And so I always say, like, trust your gut more than try to manufacture it.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news. I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Li Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
But the other thing that I'll flag is what you see on our social media profiles could have been produced by one person, but it could have been touched by as many as like 13 or 14 people. And when I say touched, it means like, we have a video team. So maybe they did the actual video. In that case, it would be a couple of us. But we also have this whole chorus, I would say, a writer's room on Slack in our office of people who maybe social media isn't actually part of their job description, or at least it's not like a significant part. But over the years, we've learned they either have like really funny ideas, or maybe they just have like a good sensibility of like, hey, that movie is not known by a lot of people. We shouldn't try referencing that. And so we have this group now in Slack, again, kind of a product of the COVID remote period, but now it's persisted. And I think there are 14 people in it, and only 3 of them really have social media in their official job description. The rest are just hanging out. Yeah. and that is the birthplace of most of our content. I would say everything that you see started in one form there. However, much of what is workshopped in there never sees the light of day because the writer's room workshops it, picks it apart, etc. Sometimes we have plenty of ideas that like maybe that's not right for the institutional account, so let's just keep that here and that's it.
Okay, so I love the idea of a writer's room. I have some questions. When you say only 3 or 4 of them actually have social in their title and the rest are hanging out, did you recruit them? Are they students? Like how are they in this room?
We have had students. We actually this year we had our first ever practicum student, which was great. So for 6 months we had an MSPH student who was embedded in our team. Most of the people, however, their job might be like they're an editorial writer for the articles on the website, or maybe they're the video production team or something. And so their job isn't explicitly social, but we work so closely together in that one of the truisms that we always say in our office anyway is you should never be making anything for any format without thinking a little bit about how people are going to access it.
Mm-hmm.
Like making an article on their website is not enough to get people to read the article on the website. You got to email it out to people, put it on social, all of the things we do, search engine. And so we're all currently in touch with each other throughout the day anyway, workshopping this stuff. This channel, which we deliberately keep like closed from mostly, frankly, their managers,
Sure.
is a place for them to kind of kick around ideas in that way.
And when you say 13 to 14 people might have touched a piece of content, is your team that big? Or
the overall communications and marketing team at the School of Public Health, I believe these days is in the 30s. And so it includes teams dedicated to, website development, teams for writing, teams for multimedia and graphic design. We have a PR team, and then my team is the marketing team. So this is like a cross group of not every team is represented and not everyone on every team, but like in this channel, we have a good range of sensibilities.
Okay, so I like the collaboration. So it's not that you have 13 to 14 people reporting to you.
Oh, no, I can't tell most of these people what to do at all. It's a lot of me asking, and that's been sort of why we do also lean funny is it does work from an audience perspective, but it's also easier for me to get writers to be enthusiastic about something they can have fun with than if I were to say, World Cloth Bound Books Day is coming up next week. Who has an idea? And they may not.
Because that's so exciting. No, I hear you. So while we're talking about teams, can you just describe yours real quick? Like the social media core team?
Yeah. So when I started, I was a one-person operation for social. I ran all of the accounts. Actually, 10 years ago, I ended up starting most of the accounts that you see today.
Sure.
I reported at the time to the director of PR and media relations, who actually moved elsewhere within the JHU system not long after I joined. So for a while, I was like truly had nobody. I was reporting like what should have been two bosses above me who had like no time to really deal with the things I was bringing to their table. Since then, I've been fortunate where first they got a new PR director. I was there. By that point, I had been moved up to what they were calling digital media manager, which was like a little bit more multifaceted than just social. I was starting to do more analytics, paid, etc. And so as I stayed with the school longer, as I developed myself, there came a point, and I'm actually hazy on when exactly it was, where they determined like he's doing a lot of marketing and his team is not. So we should kind of move that. And now I'm in a position where my audience development team, which we never had like a great name set up. It's like audience development and marketing. It's myself. We have one full-time social media associate and then one marketing strategist, and they have a marketing specialist who helps them. And so it's 4 full-time. And then as well, we have a part-time worker who we engage to do Chinese language social media, which is a lot of like adapting what we're already doing for Chinese platforms. And that one fits nicely with us because our marketing strategist and his like sole focus is enrollment marketing, which is different from a lot of what our organic social media strategy reinforces. And so we all obviously work together, but that allows us to keep like the enrollment marketing for international students like within the same team.
Wow. And you've found value in marketing specifically in Chinese as well?
Yeah. So we'll do a lot of adaptations of existing website content, but just natively on a platform like WeChat. And the audience there, it's kind of different for us to approach because it's often less the actual prospective student and more their family wanting to read it.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. That can actually be a whole nother conversation. But staying on the humor topic, how do you know which memes or trends that you want to participate in?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I've said before to people is I try not to be the first brand account to use a meme that I see individuals using. One of the instincts there is self-protective. I don't want to be the first brand who gets a a copyright notice. Like if we're all doing it, they can't yell at us all.
Sure.
But most often I think it's a game of deciding, like, where in the lifespan of the meme are we? Because it follows a pretty predictable pattern of, some people are using it. Someone's going to do something really funny and bring it like to the next level. It might get normalized. And what I mean by that is like other brands are now using it. So like the NBA is using it, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's like a cycle where it's like meta memes about that meme. And you want to kind of get in right around there, because when people are making like the meta meme about the meme, that means a critical mass of people get the format already. You don't want to be like 2 days later than that when it's like no one's doing this. Like right now, I would not do a Taylor Swift album release post because this is 2 weeks later. So
you want to get on the early end, right? Yeah.
Yes. Like the sort of like the upswing before it starts going down. Yeah.
But other than timing, how do you select which memes kind of work for you guys?
I think we've learned a couple like styles of joke work best. And for lack of a better term, I would say probably the best one is like dad joke level humor. like a really bad pun tends to like be a people pleaser.
Excellent.
And so we have a couple reliable formats that we've gone to the well a few times on. One is like song lyrics. So in that regard, like the meme is less like the format of like we're going to riff on these song lyrics and more like whatever song we know is kind of circulating right now. Another one might be we've had some success recreating fake New Yorker cartoons. We've created it's called the Baltimoreker. And that one's easy because you can just find like a clip art style drawing and make it whatever you want. People recognize the concept, and that is the ideal format for like a really bad pun. Like, so
that's a great idea. I'm sure people that are listening will definitely steal that one.
We tried a couple different concepts of other comics, but the New Yorker one is the easiest to replicate because it's black and white and all that. So,
and your audience likes it. Apparently it really speaks to your audience.
Yeah. When you think through, I mean, a lot of what social media managers a lot of what marketers have to do is generalizing about their audience. But when you think through the typical public health practitioner and then the typical New Yorker subscriber, there's a fair amount of overlap there. So.
Yeah. In the Venn diagram of audiences. Yeah, no, I get it. So say for those who run a flagship social media account that don't have like one specific topic or area or genre, whatever it may be, how do you recommend they find their voice and tone or even like humor when it comes to this kind of content?
Yeah, I would say there's not going to be one answer for every brand account manager out there, but I would say that there likely are some persona type details that you can play into regardless of how broad your institution is. So maybe it's that everyone who goes to your campus, regardless of what they're studying, has to confront the fact that you're in like a rural part of the country. And maybe that becomes like something you look to for entertainment or like self-awareness or all of that stuff. Could also be, maybe you're in like an urban setting. Maybe it's like the joke is like it's like a big city and there's all sorts of things you can play with there. I was at a case conference multiple years ago, I want to say like 2017 or so, out in LA. And there was a presentation from someone talking about the highest performing posts at their campus that were lately, doing well. And the consensus among the person presenting, but also everyone who got called on, was that the best performing post every year is just the first snow-covered campus of the day, or of the season, rather.
It's true, yeah.
And the conference is in LA, and the UCLA social media manager was there and raised their hand. It was like, what am I supposed to do with that? and we all workshopped. We were like, you got to just Photoshop snow all over like that would do well. Like just do or like have like a single ice cube. And like when everyone else is doing that, be like, here's our snow.
That's really funny.
So I think there's always things you can do. You just might have to think outside the box in terms of other factors than subject matter and more like things unique about the school.
That almost makes me think of like inside jokes, which
Yes.
I think always do well. They're inside jokes that may have another meaning to those that are in the community, but everyone sort of not in the community will also understand it because it's not too far-fetched. So tap into the inside, like sort of the community jokes or legends. I don't know, urban legends that exist, maybe.
Yeah, and you got to be careful when you go too far back in any institution's history, but there might be some more recent historical ones that are funny. For instance, the university I'm a part of, Johns Hopkins, at one time did not have a music school. There was a separate standalone music school. And then Johns Hopkins took over the school. And so you can still find alumni who are old enough who don't understand that they're actually Johns Hopkins alumni now. And you could already see like how this might get funny, where it's like, you know, maybe around Giving Day, it's like someone following you around, like, are you sure you didn't go to Johns Hopkins? Like that.
That's actually, that's a great example. Well, I'm going to ask you the last question that I ask all my guests. Nick, what is your confession?
My confession, maybe with a intended listenership of my own boss, is that years ago when she started, she was thinking like, oh, I want to follow your social media accounts to see like how you're doing it. And I said I didn't have any. and I've never.
And she believed
that.
you?
Yeah, they're just all private. I just don't want that. So I'm out there. I see things, but yeah, I try not to be too much in the limelight.
I think that's fair. But if people do want to find you in a professional sense, which
yeah, LinkedIn is totally fine. I'm Nick Moran on there. So
okay, Nick, thank you so much for sharing your tips and your tactics and your humor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Mallory Wilsey, and so many others of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.